welcome back to Art with Emily. Today's episode is Dido the Whale Part 2. So if you haven't watched Part 1, please pause the video and go back to Part 1 because otherwise you'll discover the secrets of Part 2 without knowing the background. And we want you to have a beautiful illustrated story by the end of this. So it's really important to have those images that we developed together in Part 1. So for this episode, all you're going to need is paper and a pencil or a pen. I'm using an A3 piece of paper and I've divided it with a pencil line into two. If you don't have an A3 piece, just use 2 pieces of A4 and that will work perfectly. And I would recommend starting with a pencil and then you can always go over it afterwards with a pen if you want to make it a little bit more vibrant. So we're going to delve straight back into the story. We left Dido last time. She had bashed her nose and looked up at the palace in front of her, which was made of gold with really tall towers and slides wrapping their way around the towers. So we're going to leave Dido approaching the entranceway to the palace, and instead we're going to focus in one of the tallest towers in the top room, which again is made entirely of gold. And in this top room lives the king crab called Clipper the crab. And Clipper is doing what he tends to do every day in his beautiful palace. He's waking up with a bit of a boogie. So we're going to draw Clipper to start with, and we're going to draw him dancing as a way to introduce ourselves to Clipper. So I'm going to have him fill my entire box at the top. I'm going to talk you through some of the key features of a crab as we go through. So I'm going to start with the body. So the body of Clipper, it almost looks like a clam or a fan shape that you can imagine. So it's wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. And it's quite a lumpy shell, so it's bumpy along the top. It's got a very bumpy shell because he's quite a wise old crab. He's also not accustomed to visitors because people tend to leave him alone. They know him around the area. He's a bit of a grumpy crab. So they don't try and trespass on his property because they know that they won't get a warm welcome. Weirdly, he's very grumpy, but at the same time likes to boogie, so we have a little bit of a confused crab as well. So crabs have 8 legs. So they have 8 legs that go around their body, and they then have 2 big pincers at the top. So I'm going to show these dancing by having one pincer higher than the other. So we're going to have a bit of that kind of shape. So thinking about the body and the legs, if you think about crab legs, they have multiple parts to each leg. So they have 3 or 4 joins to each leg. So it kind of is like bulges and then bulges and then bulges. See if that helps you draw your legs. Clipper is quite well fed. Let's put it that way. He is a lovely, lovely fed crab. So he's not a skinny crab. He gets lots of fish to choose from because he doesn't have anyone fighting them off him. Brilliant. So I've got my 2 at the bottom, my 2 legs. I'm then going to draw my 2 going along the next 2 along. So if you're thinking about which direction to have them in, as legs go up, they tend to go outwards. So we kind of have down and then they go out and then up at the pincers at the top. So his shell, aside from the bumps at the top, which is a little bit like Dido's barnacles, is quite smooth. He takes pride in polishing his shell. That's part of his weekly routine. He spent a long time as well decorating the room that he's in, so that he has the most lavish hotel, well, not hotel, it's his own place, palace room that he can, so that if anyone ever does come to visit him, say relatives, they're always jealous of what they see. He's that kind of person. He wants people to know that he has the best setup. So I'm on to my last leg before the pincers. I hope you are too. With his podgy legs. Brilliant. So now on to the pincers. The pincers are quite large, and I'm going to have my right one lower than my left. Looks like a very strong, beefy arm, my one. And then I'm going to put his eye. So we've got one lower arm, which is nice and beefy because of his podgy nature. And then I'm going to have my other arm going out at another angle. And that made me chuckle because it looks hilarious. So I hope yours looks funny too. And the final way that I'm going to make him look like he's dancing is I'm going to have little lines, a bit like how we had Dido sprinting through the ocean and she had lines whipping backwards. We're going to have lines jagging out to the side to show that he's dancing. And because he rules his palace, Clipper is of course a king, as we discovered earlier, so we're going to put a little crown in the middle. I'm going to put a little... So, if you haven't quite finished your Clipper, then pause the video. I'm going to show you mine now. So we have little Clipper with his crown and his boogieing arms, dancing around, having a little jiggle. So at this point, he's dancing like crazy, as he always does. And then he suddenly hears this noise deep in the depths below him at the base of the palace. It's a little bit of a rumble, just a bit of a, faint in the background, and he is thinking, doesn't matter. He continues to boogie away, and then he hears it again, and he's like, no one is bold enough to enter my grounds, right? But it continues to grow, and it gets ever so slightly louder, not significantly, but Clipper is very attuned to the palace that he's in, and any increase in the vibrations will work their way through the palace, and he notices it. So Clipper has stopped his boogieing because this is a very serious matter. He does not want people visiting him without prior invitation. So we have Clipper right at the top of this palace, listening acutely. So whilst we leave Clipper there, we'll come back to him next week in the next episode. We're just going to rejoin Dido, who, as we've heard from Clipper, is moving through the palace. So we're going to draw her coming up to the entranceway and her first glance into the inner sanctum of the palace. So we have to redraw Dido for this. So remember, Dido has a very long body. You can look at what you drew last time so that you can replicate that if you prefer. She has speckles all over her back. She has the markings down her neck. So we're just going to draw, and I'm going to draw her a bit smaller than scene 1. And I'm going to start her about halfway on halfway. So if this is my halfway point, I'm going to draw her on this side. And remember, she's got her tail, and mine's actually gone off the page. And then we've got her fin. Her mouth. And her eyes open, which is a very clear difference than scene 1. And we have her body with her speckles and her barnacles. And a little fin on her back. So we have Dido back. So all on the left hand side. So nicely positioned on the left. And Dido has got to the entranceway. So if we remember from scene 1, we had an archway, which the slide came. So the slide came down, and the entranceway was the exit of the slide. So she's got her nose inside the arch. So I'm going to draw an arch over her nose. The way I like to think about this is it's easy to imagine. If you think of a ribbon, and if you're looking at a ribbon and it goes up and then it falls down. So we go up and we don't see the top, and then it comes down the other side. So that's how I like to remember it. So as she has got closer to this archway, she has started to see lots of engravings in the gold. So lots of patterns swirling up the inside and the outside that she couldn't see from a distance. It's so intricately decorated. She's never seen anything like it. So I'm going to start by drawing some patterns on the inside. And the patterns that she sees are diamonds. So diamond shapes are all over and adorn the inside of this archway. And there's one really large diamond shape engraved. But instead of all the other diamond shapes which have a gem in the middle, which we can only guess is a diamond, there's a massive one missing. So it's empty. I'm going to show that it's empty by doing some lines to show that there's nothing there. So just like this. So all of the other ones have the diamonds in them, so we need to make sure we draw those diamonds. But we're missing the biggest one. She doesn't really take any notice about this, just acknowledges it, just remembers it, but she doesn't really fixate on the fact that there's a missing stone. On the outside, instead of diamonds, we have intricate small swirls working their way up and down. So draw these however you would like. So we're just going to have, almost imagining, if you've seen some paintings by Klimt, the Tree of Life, for example, anything that's the inspiration that Clipper had, potentially. So lots of lovely swirling patterns all along the outside. So try and create some sort of regularity perhaps to the pattern so that it all looks like it's joined, it's there for a purpose, rather than lots of random sections. If you prefer it to be random though, that's entirely your choice. So these are my patterns. So loads of swirls all the way up the outside, engraved into the gold, and my diamonds on the inside with one missing. So at the bottom of the palace, we had archways all the way across on the right hand side. So I'm going to draw those in, so they're going to be off to the left, and it's going to be slightly curved because it bends if we remember our previous image. So we have our archways bending around the bottom, and again she gets close to them and she sees that there's lots of more delicate, so they're not swirling patterns, but they're loads of delicate patterns. And so she gets a little bit closer and she looks harder and she can see them. So I'm going to just draw some patterns. So to me, they're going to be a zigzag across the top. And I'm going to create, this is the pattern that I've chosen to decorate it. It's very up to you what you want to do. So along the top, almost like a banner running across the top. And I'm going to do little echoes of that pattern underneath. So we almost have 3 zigzag lines in a row. And in the upper 2, I'm going to do a swirling pattern. So not complete swirls like before, just wiggly lines, so that they contrast with the straight lines like before. So it looks a little bit, it's very abstract, a little bit not quite clear what it is because it doesn't recognise in our minds. And then on the way down, they're going to have some vertical lines. So, Dido is looking all the way around her. She sees the slide that disappears upwards that had been wrapped around and coming into the entranceway. So she sees that. So I'm lightly going to draw that in. And she has seen the arches on the right hand side. She sees, the final thing that she sees is the base of the tower, the first tower to the right of the archway, and she sees that, and only really the bottom, because it's so large and goes up so high that she can't see anymore. And we had lines coming down that so that you can put those lines in, and it had a base, which I'm going to show with those lines. So our first scene is where we had Clipper dancing around until he froze when he heard a mumbling in the deep of the castle. And then we had, the mumbling was Dido, who was approaching the entranceway and started to swim through and look around at all of the amazing patterns adorning all of the walls. So this is what our 2 scenes look like at the end of part 2. We have loads of wonderful patterns. I imagine that you probably got something different, which is wonderful, and I'd love to see it. We have our slide that will take us up and twisting around the towers, And we have one of our towers here with the base, which I've shown with some small lines. So Dido is ending the scene very happy and very surprised and amazed at what she's seeing. And instead we have Clipper in the previous scene, who's actually pretty mad and furious because no one ever enters his castle without him knowing. And we'll leave it there to explore further next week. So I hope you enjoyed that and have some beautiful artwork as a result. Please share on social media with the hashtag ArtKOnline, and I will get to see it, which I would love to do. And do remember to like and subscribe to the channel, because that way you'll see the next episode of Dido as soon as possible, as well as all of the other ones that we have throughout the week. But that's it for today. It was lovely to draw with you, and I hope to see some of your artwork soon.